One of these days I'll learn how to sing. All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, hello, hello. This is Dr. Mary Payton with All About STEM Radio. As y'all know, I come to you every Wednesday from 6 to 7 here on the Blue Stream. And hey, it is August. And some of the kids have gone back to school. Some of them haven't. Most of the teachers are doing in-service. And, it's that time again. Just enjoy, enjoy, enjoy. You kids, y'all get out there, y'all learn something new, do something new, figure out what you want to do. And, those of you who are in high school, you need to make sure you start thinking about those scholarships. I'll start posting some on the All About STEM radio show Facebook page very soon. And later, I think September, I'm going to have a lady on that's going to be talking about scholarships. So y'all start to get ready for that because money going to college is not cheap. And don't forget, the Arlington Museum of Art has the Keith Haring exhibit. It will be here till September 15th, and I'm excited about having them on the show at the end of this month. All about STEM, where we stick STEAM in there too. But, today was a hot day. Hopefully you all rehydrated. And if you know of any wonderful people who could be a guest on the All About STEM radio show, please, please, please hit me up on Facebook, All About STEM Radio, or email me at allaboutSTEMradio@gmail.com. Today, I gotta tell y'all, I have a guest. I'm gonna hold up her book because I know this is Facebook Live and y'all should be able to see it. She is a wonderful person. When I was putting together her promo, I'm sorry, I got very emotional. My son Aaron was like, Mom, you okay? I'm like, yeah. And I was telling him about her because you don't meet very many people like this. We always talk, I'm always talking about my wonderful 29 years, 11 months, and 13 days in the military. But she was in Vietnam. I always meet wonderful men who have been in Vietnam, but this is the first young lady I've met who served. So I am totally, totally excited about her. And, she is an outstanding person, and I'm going to let her introduce herself. Diane?
Well, hi, this is Diane.
Oh, your headset's right there.
Oh.
You're okay.
I'm just doing something. Oh,
See, we're acting like sisters already.
I am. I am. Well, my name is Diane Klutz. I wasn't always a Klutz. I was a mumper before I was a Klutz. But anyway, and I was a nurse in Vietnam. I went there 1970, came back in 1971. But we'll go into that, I guess, a little bit later.
Oh, yeah, we'll go into that later.
And that, but I'm not sure. What do you want me to say here?
Well, are you originally a Texas girl or?
No.
Where are you from?
No, I grew up in southwestern Pennsylvania.
Okay, and you
And-
got to Texas as fast as you could.
Well, I'm not sure about that. When I met my husband, he was just back from Vietnam. He was in Fort Gordon, Georgia, and he told me. I asked him where he's from, and he just said Arlington. Well, I assumed he was a homeboy because the only Arlington I knew about was Arlington, Virginia.
Yeah.
And of course, he's no, Six Flags. No, never heard of Six Flags. So, anyway, yeah, and then after we married, and I got out of the service, and then yes, I came to Texas.
Okay, all right. So, and you still with Mr. Steve? He's sitting over here looking handsome.
Yeah,
So-
40, almost 48 years, I think,
Ooh.
coming up to that.
What's the secret?
Perseverance. I don't know.
That's okay. That's okay. But now, how I met Diane was at the North Texas Book Festival. She was there, and she had on her military hat, and we just started talking, and I was just totally amazed at her and her story, and we laughed about my story and her story, and obviously the fun that we had, and the trying times we probably had while we were in the service. But back then in Vietnam, well, where did you go to school? Because you were in Vietnam in what years?
Well, I went to, I went to Vietnam in 1970, but I went
Okay.
into the service, actually. I was enlisted.
Okay.
So I did that my junior year of nursing school. So that would have been in 1968.
Okay.
And then I graduated in 69. But, growing up, being a nurse, I'll backtrack why I became a nurse, basically.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get to.
Is because in the 60s, there wasn't much else for a girl to do.
Yeah.
You could be a secretary, a housewife, or a nurse, basically. Well,
Or a school teacher.
a school teacher. And I didn't like the other three options.
Yeah.
And so, and because college was expensive, and I had two brothers in college, and so this way I could go to a hospital, and the tuition was very inexpensive because from day one they put you to work on the floor.
Oh, yeah.
So, you were basically slave labor for a long time there, doing bedpans and duties and stuff like that. But yeah, so that's what got me there. But I didn't ever want to go back to the small town of 200 people.
Oh,
Where
okay.
my family was, and the good way to get my adventure I wanted was to join the military, and it was an Army recruiter came first, so that's what I did. And my dad had been a medic in World War II, and
Okay.
my brothers were in the military, so my dad said, okay, yeah, okay. So they signed the paperwork.
I mean, what did they think about their daughter? She's in college, she's going to school, and then she's considering making the transition to the military as opposed to going to work in one of the major medical centers back then.
I don't know what they thought about it. I mean, I guess they quizzed me and was wondering why.
Uh-huh.
But I don't think there was too much. I don't remember too much. There wasn't any dissension. They just wanted to know if this is something that I wanted to do. And I said yes. I felt the drawing to adventure. I felt the drawing of going into the military and saving people. I was the Florence Nightingale of the 1960s, So me and Flo had a thing going,
Okay.
going to do that.
All right. But, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, back then, because I've looked at the history of women being in the military, and, you consider, there are certain reasons that you can't stay. Like if you got married, you couldn't stay. If after a while you could stay if you were married, but if you got pregnant, you couldn't stay. And, all of that's changed. Because I went in, got married, had both of my lovely children that are now grown, and but back then, when you went in, how did you really function being in a male dominated service or job area?
I think for one part, we were raised that way.
Yeah.
So it kind of came a little just the way life was, so you put up with a lot of it. But a lot of it, I think I kind of, what can I say? I questioned a lot, and so I also got into trouble a lot because I said no many times when I probably was not supposed to.
Yeah.
But I did. And I think that, I just, when they would say something stupid that I thought was stupid, I'd say, well, why? And when an order, something was given that, well, this is an order, I said, well, that's the stupidest reason to do something, But, yeah.
Yeah.
But there was, and I think that there was definitely in the military the feeling that women only joined the military because they wanted to. It was sexual, or it was there to get money, or it was only there for one thing because they couldn't get a man any way else, and so, or they're looking for a husband, or on and on and on.
You remember long time ago, they used to say that's why women went to college. You go to college, you study, humanities, and that's where you find your husband is why you're in college.
That's right. Makes you a better wife.
Yeah.
So to speak. But yeah, I mean, and so during those times, that was just kind of, that was the expectation of us. And there wasn't, I think the good thing about military nursing is that for the most part, those are patients, and I think that the people we worked with took us seriously.
Yes.
Because we worked just as hard.
Yes.
As they did at what was going on. And so there was more of a camaraderie, I would say, than in civilian nursing.
Now, when you first, what college did you go to back then? Because we're always looking at schools and where people go, and we're talking about the '60s. So
yeah, it was a hospital school of nursing.
Oh, okay.
So it was a diploma program, that was in existence forever. And just about the time that I was in the associate degree, 2-year programs were coming along.
Yeah.
But then those weren't, you didn't live at the hospital. You didn't stay there. So this was a 3-year, 36-month program.
Okay.
And so it was north of Pittsburgh.
Okay.
A little town north of Pittsburgh.
Okay. Kind of similar to what my aunt did. She went to back then was TCJC, now it's TCC, and did her 2-year thing, and then she went. Her other stuff came through working through hospitals and stuff. So
oh yeah, definitely.
I understand.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, hey, y'all, nursing is still a wonderful, wonderful career field.
I think nursing now is so much better, so much more. I encourage men, women. I mean, it is the variety of, I can't say fields, the variety of careers within the field of nursing.
Yeah, the specializations.
Is so, now, I mean, some nurses don't even put a finger on a patient. Because they're doing all the technical. We have everything out there to enhance the practice. But with the technology coming along, it's amazing to me. I can't keep up with it at all.
I know. I still have not logged into the VA's telemedical program thing.
Because haven't either.
I'm like, I really don't get sick, and they may tell me something's wrong, and
and you're like, uh-oh.
yeah. Now I'm nervous.
Yeah.
So I haven't done that. I keep looking at that pamphlet, but I haven't done it yet.
No, I don't think we have either. Yeah. But well, one of these days.
I know. That's what I keep saying. But getting to your time in Vietnam, when you first graduated college and joined the service, did you go through regular basic training?
We had, and I keep calling it officers medical basic training. That's really not what the name was. I mean, I even have my certificate, but I don't ever remember.
The AMED officers course.
Oh, well, then thank you.
Only reason I know that is I have one of those certificates from,
that's right. You were
from
down
doing
there,
correspondence courses with them.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And so, that was San Antonio, Fort
Yep.
Sam Houston, January of 1970. So we had, I guess it was 6 weeks. I thought it was 8 weeks, but I think it was only 6 weeks. But they taught us how to shoot guns, how to, gas mask stuff. Oh gosh, we did navigation trails, put us out in the field at Camp Bullis, gave us a map and a compass and told us, bless you, be off. And
yeah.
but you know, the funny thing about being mostly females, we
Yeah.
did have a few male nurses, but mostly females in our group, was that all of the warrant officers had their helicopters, and they were on duty to rescue all of us who were lost out in the field. It was kind of silly, actually, but yeah, they'd keep landing. Y'all okay? And go away.
Well, at least you had that. I was lost for 14 hours doing land nav up in at Fort Sill, Oklahoma.
Ooh,
I know.
I wouldn't want to be
When I was in
doing that.
ROTC, they just dropped us off and said, find your way back. And they eventually found me sitting on the road. Like, okay, I don't know where I am, but I'm okay. I'm alive.
I'm alive. Oh Lord.
But anyway, you were at Fort Sam.
Yeah. Yeah. So Fort Sam and you know, I mean, it was probably the fastest, best 6 weeks of my life, but I discovered men really there. But no, it was good. It was
Yeah.
training. We did field surgical training, so we
Yeah.
were in the field hospital. Did a lot of learning how to debride wounds and do trachs on people, goats.
Yeah.
But we did all that.
Okay. Now, when you left there, and what was the process of you leaving the U.S. and going to Vietnam? How was that transition?
Well, the transition was just, excuse me, that you went to, I think it was Fort Dix,
Okay.
and then got on the plane, you know, when they assigned us, and we flew over there, landed in Benoit, and that was our in processing. So that's where we got our uniforms and did all of that, got what all we needed
Yeah.
for being transferred, and that's where we got our assignments for where we were going to be posted was
Okay.
there. So we didn't know where we were going to be stationed until we went through processing.
Okay. All right.
So that was neat.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I am here with I forgot to say she's Dr. Diane Klutz, author of Round Eyes, An American Nurse in Vietnam. And we're sitting here we're starting to talk about her time in Vietnam. And then later on, we've got to talk about this book and your work, because she is not only a nurse, she is a nurse practitioner. And, you know, she's got some wonderful things that she is doing. So if you have any questions, you can please call in at 214-431-5062. That's 214-431-5062. I have to make sure I don't give out my own phone number. So you get to Vietnam. Where were you first stationed at over there?
Well, the only place I was stationed after Benoit was up in Quy Nhon.
Okay.
And that is an area, it's right on the coast. So it's on the South China Sea.
Yeah.
Is the ocean there. And it had a runway because it was small. It wasn't an Air Force base. Now, there was an Air Force base north of us, but it was up in the mountain type thing. But we had the airstrip. Mostly was helicopters that came in and out, because that's where the wounded and so forth. We did all the the evacs came through there, and it was not Quonset Hut like up in Da Nang
Okay.
that you see with China Beach and
Yeah.
and all of that. This was old buildings.
Okay.
I don't know what they were before, but they converted them, and so we had 6 units, and in the Quonset Hut was because they were a little more secure,
Okay.
or not secure. They were more stable, less likely to be blown, or something like that. And that's where recovery and surgery and those sort of things.
So you were at like a
Happen.
medevac hospital,
We
not
were-
a front.
It was an evacuation hospital, which at that time was, aside from that, what was I'd say the first line was the field hospital,
Right. Mm-hmm.
which weren't really, quote, hospitals.
Yeah.
It was a temporary thing, but it's so mostly we got our patients came in from the fronts wherever they were. They were brought in by helicopter, and then they would be, so the corpsmen out in the field would take care of them.
Yep.
And there was no nurses really out in those places, and then they would fly them in, and then they'd come in for triage and go where they needed to go.
Okay.
But on the same count, there was also buses that came that would bring patients at the same time. So certain days was a very big, say, patient incoming day, because we knew there would be buses. So on those buses would perhaps be the hepatitises, the malarias, all of that, the psychiatric patients. They would be brought in. Those that didn't need anything surgically done or was an emergency came in by bus. And then they came through, and typically they didn't go through the main triage where everybody was. They were kind of triage outside the buses and then brought to us to triage on the ward, so to speak.
Okay. Now, through your experiences, what you wrote this first book, because you have, how many books do you have? 2 or 3?
2 books.
2 books so far.
Working on the
so
third.
far.
Yeah,
working
so
on
far.
the third. So from that experience, you wrote this first book. Can you tell me a little bit about how this book came about?
Well, I think, number one, I love to read.
Yep.
And always enjoyed writing or whatever. And but it was my uncle Bob, who was retired naval captain, who wrote several books, and he published them himself.
Okay.
And so he kept saying, Diane, you need to write some stuff. And I had written a few little odds and ends and sent it out, and he would say, you just need to write a book about your experiences. But it wasn't and so I would jot down things, and just kind of keep track. And it wasn't until really 2011 that, actually I quit working, and said, this is what I'm going to do. And I was teaching that time at A&M Corpus Christi.
Okay.
And so that's when I started putting it together. And it was, I guess, an exercise in catharsis, kind of getting things out, And, and yes, my memory was not all it was. It was after 40-some years. And it's funny because this is actually the second edition of the book, because my first edition ran out of print. But so that was last year, and my roommate, after the first edition came out, who was with me in Walter Reed, my first duty station, and then again in Vietnam, she found me through somebody else. And so we'd been conversing, and she would send me pictures. And then finally, when it came time that I was going to have to do something, I asked her, I said, would you consider letting me put some of these pictures in? And I scrounged up some of mine. And it just became more real then. I mean, putting it down, it was kind of a pictorial history. And so people that have seen that said, oh, that's kind of what it was like. That's what it looked like. I couldn't imagine it from the words. But I think that doing it, one of the comments I made beginning was I was writing it so my grandkids would really know their grandma wore combat boots, But I think that after that, it was very interesting. I went to schools down in Round Rock and in different areas, and I would go to my grandkids' schools, and the kids would come up, and we'd talk about writing, and we'd talk about being in the military, and it was just so heartfelt. Some of the kids would say, or my mama is in the military, or my dad was in the military, or my pop, grandfather, he was in Vietnam, and stuff like that. And so it became real to me. It became real that it was a story, people would say, well, why are you doing this now? It's a story that needs to be shared. We can't forget Vietnam, just like we can't forget Korea or Iraq.
Yep.
We can't brush it aside and pretend it didn't happen, because there's lessons learned
Yeah.
from all of it.
And there's so many, people of color, whites, blacks, Hispanics, Asians, women. And, there was one of the things I thought about when my mobilization to Fort Sam during 9/11 was there was one thing we would never be used to, and they never showed it on television. The women that were coming back that were injured, and they were being brought to BAMC. And I would go to the hospital sometimes and just sit outside, because people would come down just to be out of their rooms and just talk to people. And many of them were women. And this is a story that, we are a intricate part of serving our military, serving our country.
But people don't want to hear that.
No, they don't.
And it was interesting. One of the books I read, and I think it's not We Band of Nurses, but it was it's another book about World War II, but it's about the nurses World War II. But these are the nurses that were in North Africa.
Okay.
And so they were getting ready for D-Day. And they were figuring out the thing. And so they had this, the groups of nurses who were in Africa were scheduled to be on the landing boats at Normandy. I mean, they were scheduled to be there. And President Eisenhower, not then president, but General Eisenhower said, no, you cannot expect the American people, they cannot hear that their daughters are on the front lines at the major intersection of this thing. So keep them back 2 days. So it was 2 to 3 days later that they landed, and actually the terror was not over for them.
Yeah.
But it was just the thought, you can't expect us. The American people will not stand for reading that their daughters are on the front line.
No. They never would, because my particular career field, because I was chemical, and we were not in the back. If you were a smoke platoon leader or a decon platoon leader or a recon platoon leader, we were in the front. We're putting down smoke for the people that are behind us. And a lot of us were female. But you never hear about that. Or you got people moving around with supply. But, I understand that, this is a book that had to be written. So tell us some of the things that you have in here. Read us a little piece or.
Well, I do just have this. I think that one of the questions you asked was it's in a chapter I had, nursing in combat boots. And it was just interesting. Basically, South Vietnam, nursing in the military in South Vietnam was similar to nursing in the States, except for the occasional mortar attacks and the differences in uniform, which struck me most. But rather than white uniforms, caps, hose, and shoes, we wore green fatigues, combat boots, and boonie hats. We also had our dog tags everywhere and at all time. Now, the perfect Army nurse wore her baggy pants, fatigues, bloused. That meant they were in your boots, tucked out. Shirt was buttoned neatly, all the way down, and cuffed. Hair off her collar, and she always outside wore her boonie hat when in uniform. Well, most of us were not perfect. So our sleeves were rolled up. Our pants were not bloused or tucked into our boots, because most of us, when we got in country, when we were down Benoit, found a tailor to immediately take our baggy pants in and make them nice and skinny, so they could fit snugly. And it just, the look that they gave us was not fashionable at all. No. And so, we figured that hair that was down and free-flowing was so much better looking than all that other stuff up. So we did that too. So those were just some of the differences. But I will mention one thing, that the Air Force nurses that landed, that were in Cameron back in the mid 60s, the very first nurses to sit up in the hospital, they had to wear that time their white starch nurses' uniforms, their white starch hats, their white shoes. Now, shortly after they were there, they were told they didn't have to wear the white stockings, because at that time there still wasn't pantyhose, so they had to wear the garter belts and the girdles and all that, keep it up. So they could, get away from that. And they weren't even issued flight jackets or any helmets or anything until their area got mortared. And then suddenly they came to the realization that
they needed to change.
Maybe things are different, that nurses are in danger. One of the other things I think that, excuse me, that is near and dear to me is remembering the patients. Mm-hmm. And I think that it was the patients that we went to take care of. It was the soldiers. Mm-hmm. Again, we were like Florence going to the Crimea War. We wanted to be there to help and to do whatever we could. It was a little different how it was set up, but still, it was that for years after the war, I didn't want to remember. I didn't want to. And I didn't talk to my brothers. We didn't talk about the stuff, and they were there at the same time too, my brothers.
Wow.
But we didn't share things until the book came out. And then we started talking about our stories and things. But I wanted to put that part away. But I wonder back to that time, and I think the thing that makes the most sense to me was the American soldiers. There was always a few guys in there that weren't so great, but most of them at the 67th Evacuation Hospital, where I was, were absolutely wonderful. And I'm going to read this part, if that's okay.
That's fine.
They were respectful, extremely appreciative of the nurses who cared for them. Even though they were only at our hospital for a short time, bonds were formed. The nurses listened as the soldiers shared about their families, loved ones, and home. If they had pictures, they shared those also. Sometimes the nurse would write a letter home for the soldier if he requested, and sometimes the soldier asked the nurse to read a letter from home for him. But the one thing these soldiers didn't share was their war experiences. Mm-hmm. And we, the nurses, didn't ask. It wasn't from a lack of caring or even a lack of interest on the nurse's part. It was more like hearing it would bring the war into the sanctity of our hospital.
Yeah.
The hospital was one place that was as close to the real world as we could make it. The ugliness of war was forgotten amidst the work of nursing, and the soldiers had a brief respite from the killing of war or seeing friends killed. And so during the 12 hours of work or the few days as a patient, the nurses and soldiers could pretend that the war was somewhere other than where they were.
And, that's got to have made them feel a little at home, a little normal.
And I think that was the important part. I think more than anything, and I never realized that till I was putting this together. Mm-hmm. And I realized that. And we get, no matter where, I went on an honor flight and was in D.C., and it was amazing still. Some of the, there was men, different honor flights. We were the only women. First Texas honor flight. This was women only. And the men would come up and say, "Oh my gosh, you nurses, you helped us so much." Yeah. So,
but like I said, when I met you, I was like, just honored, just totally honored, totally thrilled, totally excited. And I've gone through sections of the book and have just been touched.
That's
but all in all, putting it down, putting it in a book, going out, talking about what you've done, talking about the book. How's it been being an author?
Well, I'd say being an author isn't what it was cracked up to be. I can only, and you're an author.
I know.
So you definitely know. I think it's overwhelming.
Yeah.
I think that, and my uncle told me, Diane, writing is the easy part. Yeah, all right, sure. I've been reading this thing so much I see it in my sleep, editing it and everything. But that really was the easy part. Getting it published, finding a printer. When I did my first version, I did it all myself. I had the printer, I had everything, and did it all. And then I found that I couldn't get it out there anywhere without help. So that was a whole other learning. But it's the websites, it's getting out, it's finding people who will hear, who going to book signings.
Yes.
I'm just started in the Kroger program, and so on weekends going to the different Kroger stores and sitting there watching people going by who kind of But it again, on the other hand, it's fascinating because when you're out there, so many people, a lot will just stop and share. Well, my dad was in Vietnam. Could I buy a book for him? Or this is so wonderful. I'm sorry that he's already passed away, but he would have enjoyed reading this. Or, and a lot of guys come and tell their stories where they were. So it's a great way of sharing, of just being there, and like you did. Fort Sam, you listen.
Yep. I mean, I just sat there a lot of days. I was late back to work because I'm just listening to somebody's story or looking at pictures that they wanted to show me. I'll never meet those people again, but they just wanted somebody to talk to.
And we all have stories to tell.
Yeah.
And we need to be able to have the freedom to tell them.
Yeah, but I mean, it's just... it's a time that I will never regret. Those years, I would never say, if I could get those back, I would have done something different. I would not do that.
They're yours.
They're mine. They are my years. But, since you've done the book and everything, I mean, when you left Vietnam, what did you went back to school or what did you do?
When I left Vietnam, I met my husband, Fort Gordon, Georgia, and so yes, I did start back to school. Again, at that time in early '70s, there was no bridge program. I had an RN, so in order to go back to school, I started at UT in Arlington, and I had to start over again. So I was starting the 4-year program completely over because the courses we took, even though they were through Penn State University, they were not counted as a full semester. We didn't get, quote, college credit for it like an associate degree. So I had to start over. And so that took me, when I graduated from nursing school, I remember looking at my yearbook. I said my goal was to be an Army nurse and to get my bachelor's degree. Well, 20 years after I graduated from nursing school, I graduated with my BSN. And that was through TWU, but I did it all scratch-wise. Yeah. I did it all that way. And then I took a year off and decided I wanted to get my master's. I wanted to be a nurse practitioner, but there wasn't any schools. Well, there was for pediatrics here, Arlington. But I thought, I'll just get my CNS, so clinical nurse specialist, which I did, which I found out there wasn't anything for me to do with that. And so TWU in Denton was just starting their postmaster's nurse certificate program. So I immediately joined. My husband's laughing over there. I immediately joined in on that. And 18 months later, I had my nurse practitioner, took my boards, and was certified. And then it was one of my first students, I was teaching and practicing. One of my first students went on, and she was starting the doctoral program. She had her nurse
Oh.
practitioner, but she wanted, and she kept saying, Diane, you need to do this. You need to do this. So it was, I don't know. So I graduated in 95 or finished my nurse practitioner in 95. So this was like 2000, 2001, something like that, when I started the doctoral program. And so I went through that and graduated from that in 2007.
Okay.
So
So what did you do with all of this great education that you have?
well, it's funny. The one thing about the PhD program in nursing was that it gave me because of the reading
Yeah.
and the variety of reading, it gave me such a different outlook on women because
Yeah.
I did focus on feminism, to say that. I focused on women and nurses. I gained such a appreciation of nurses since nursing began.
Yeah.
And it really made me proud to be a nurse, because before that, someone would say, even before I was a nurse practitioner, well, what do you do? Oh, I'm a nurse. It was just, I'm a nurse, nothing much. And it wasn't until that program that I realized, oh my gosh, nursing is wonderful.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of history that nurses don't even know. Heck, I
Yeah.
didn't know them.
I think I got my real glimpse of the evolution of nursing and medicine in watching. I've watched every episode of Call a Midwife.
Oh,
I don't know.
that's pretty good.
I mean,
My
you know,
daughter loves it.
but if you look at it, because I'm a science person, so I'm going to look at it from a weird perspective. Just seeing the evolution of, vaccinations and thalidomide and, contraception and all of that.
It's amazing.
I was like, dang. And, I look at it, and that show really is not that far from where I am life-wise, because a lot of that happened during my mom's and my lifetime. So I was
amazing.
like, this is wow. But anyway, so now you have your new book, and it's about what?
It's called You Can't Sleep Here. And I can
okay.
hand that to you
Let me
if
see
you'd
it.
like.
So, you can hold it up. They can, because you
Oh.
got a camera on you too.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Oh, didn't know that. Ugh. Yeah, You Can't Sleep Here. And You Can't Sleep Here it's a story of being homeless.
Okay.
But it's not a typical homeless story. And I think that it's about women who are homeless, but they're homeless with their children.
Oh.
And it's such a different. When I started doing this in my doctoral program, there wasn't any research in about small towns. There was tons of research about women and children from large cities at that time. And this was in the early, mid 2000s, and so, Los Angeles and maybe Houston, New York, but nothing from a small town. And so I set out because I was working with the homeless population in Denton, and I would go to the women's shelter there a lot for education and things like that. And then I did a lot of work. Well, I was working in the jail. I provided women's health at the jail. Mostly it was all those who were pregnant and all of that stuff. But it gave me such a bigger perspective of homelessness and everything that I wanted to investigate it. And so to do that, I couldn't do a quantitative study, which means I would ask questions, put numbers to it and things. I had to do a qualitative, and because I love stories so much, I did it via stories. And so I would interview, and ladies, would volunteer, of course. And so I would be interviewing them and recording them in various settings, Salvation Army or the one center, or we'd go somewhere and interview. And their stories, I cried. I cried with them. I just couldn't believe some of the stories. And the one thing, and so I really wrote it was because the ladies, the one thing I would ask them when we were finishing up
Yeah.
the 2 hours, and I would say, what can I do for you? What can I do? I want to help, and they were, each one of them on their own. I mean, they weren't together, but they would say, just tell our story, please. Just let people know what it's like. And so that's how it came about. But the title, You Can't Sleep Here, came about because I think I wrote it here that maybe it would make better sense. Let's see.
Okay.
My first choice for this book's title was Someone to Hear Us. We just want someone to hear us. Because that was a sentiment expressed by the 6 women when they told me their stories. They simply wanted to be heard. Yet what tugged at my heartstrings most was Thea, one of the ladies in my book. Her request, please, my children just need a place to take a nap. And she had 3 little kids. The youngest was 11 months old, something like that. One was 2, and the other was 5. And she was out on the hot streets because at the shelter where they were, they had to leave at 8 in the morning and couldn't come back till 8 at night. And this was 100+ degrees in June in Denton, Texas. So it was a hard thing. And so wherever she'd go, that somebody would say, you can't sleep here. And I just, that just tugged at me. And so that's how that came.
Wow. And this book was published when?
This, that's another long story, but this is the second edition because an issue with the first. Publishing, let me tell you, when you write a book,
I'm learning.
It's a whole new thing. So the first guy kind of took all of our authors' money and ran.
Yeah.
And so I had to go back and get another publisher and pay for all that. But so this came out in 2018.
Oh, okay.
So I had both
That's
books.
nice.
This was in April of 18, and the Round Eyes book was in October of 18.
Okay.
So it was a very busy year,
Oh, yeah.
2018. But yeah, I think that they just it was just one of those books. It's not a sad book.
Yeah.
To me, my husband says it is. He doesn't like it as much. It's a hard book, and I think that's it. It's like reading any book. It's hard. Sometimes it's hard. You don't want it to be this way.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want this. But it's also these ladies. I put the 6 ladies into 3. It's also about determination. They discovered friendship. They discovered they could do things they never thought they could do with the help of each other.
Yeah.
So it's also a hopeful book.
Yeah. It's real.
It's real.
It's
and
totally real.
hurts.
Now, where would we get these books? Where would the audience get these books? Because we've got like 4 minutes. Well, 3. Oh, he just said 3. We have 3 minutes left.
Oh, okay. Well, they are available on really Barnes & Noble, Amazon. Amazon, I will give you a little bit of my listeners out there. A little bit of a warning is you have to go to ask for the future editions because Amazon and I are still having. They still offer my first edition for sale, even though there's no things to get.
Yeah.
So it'll kind of say newer edition available. Click on that. So I'm still working.
Yeah.
But yes, on Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, and it's both of them are in the e-reader format. So the Kindle and Nook and all that is available.
And check Walmart. Ironically, my book is on Walmart, and I don't know how it got there. And I was telling some friends, and they're like, "Oh, our books are there too."
I need to check
So
that.
check and
I
see
will.
see if it's also
I never think of that.
open for order on Walmart
Yeah.
Walmart.
And then we are doing book signings. I'm going eventually. I'm going to get down here to Arlington. So that
Well,
you know.
we have Books, Burgers, and More on September 7th here in Arlington.
Really?
Our Metro Authors Group is hosting it, and we still have vendor tables available.
Oh, give me the details.
I will. I definitely will. And, this is our 3rd year,
That's so nice.
so you have to get down here.
Yes.
But so you've got Barnes and Nobles, and then your
And then Amazon.
Amazon.
And basically
But
well, it says all major retailers,
yeah,
book retailers. So, yeah, you can't go into Barnes and Noble or Books a Million. You can order, but they don't have them on the
yeah,
shelves
that's the same
because,
with mine.
yeah, we're not, we're not
Stephen King.
Stephen King or James Patterson
No.
or even Agatha Christie, for goodness sakes.
But yeah, quick question before we go. How was the Kroger thing?
It's interesting.
Uh-huh.
I've only gone one weekend, but I did sell 12 books.
Great.
But I had as much interest in this one. I didn't even post up, but I had as much interest in this book, in the You Can't Sleep Here book, than even the military book. So yeah, I'm moving out to that, but it's a lot,
Yeah.
You sit there for those hours in your chair and think, oh, I could be home cleaning house. But, but then again, sometimes you have people come by and buy it and
Yeah.
share and take your cards. So,
Yeah.
hey, can't beat that.
Can't beat that. Not at all.
And
Not
I am
at
going to
all.
put in one plug for
What?
my book. I want to put in one
Go
plug
for it.
for my book that I'm trying to finish. It's a short story, but it's called Martini Alley and Other
Ooh.
Misadventures of the Klutzes, or other Klutz. I can't even say it. Misadventures. So it's a comic. It's more funny stories. Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, it's kind of a fun read. It's humorous. It is humorous, and they're
Right.
true life stories. So what can you beat on that?
Well, since I've met Mr. Klutz over here, your life has had to have been like one wonderful, fun turn. Now, do you have kids you want to give a shout out to before we go?
Well, my daughter, Shannon,
Okay.
who's in college. Well, she's going back again, and my two grandkids, Noah and Emery.
Okay.
So they're
All
over
right.
in Little Elm.
Oh, okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have had a wonderful show today here on All About STEM Radio with Diane Klutz, who is the author of Brown Eyes, a American Nurse in Vietnam, and You Can't Sleep Here, story about homeless ladies and their struggles and trials. And you can get both of these at your various book retailers, Barnes and Nobles, Amazon,
Amazon.
Amazon, and you may be able to get them at Walmart because I was surprised that I found mine there. But this has been a wonderful, wonderful show. And, if anyone wants to advertise on All About STEM Radio, I am here for you. And also, if you know any wonderful guests, please hit me up and let me know. But until next week, this is Dr. Mary Payton with All About STEM Radio Show. Bye-bye.
Bye. Oh.